Welcome to the Reddit stories. r/Askreddit, who is universally loved, but actually in a hole. Old reference, but Gary Berghoff aka Radar from Mars H, apparently he was notoriously hard to work with and generally an a-hole to the movie and show cast and crew, but his character was so beloved that viewers never thought he was like that. On the flip side, poor Larry Linville, Major Frank Burns, was known to be an extremely nice guy, but got sneered at and generally treated like crap by the public due to his character in the show. Just goes to show you should separate the art from the artist. Not sure if they are universally loved, but I used to work in restaurants for the House of Mouse, and both Howie Mandel and Bobby McFerrin were total jerks. Acted like they were completely above everyone else, and both of them let their bratty kids run screaming around the restaurant. Always smart when people carrying hot trays of food are everywhere. I had a lot of positive celebrity interactions, but those two were awful. Can't stand to listen to Don't Worry, Be Happy since. I don't think he's famous enough to be universally loved, but Mitch Albom, aka the author of Tuesdays with Morrie, hosted him at an author event for a small venue, and he was fucking furious that the event was so beneath him, was furious we didn't have a plate of fresh fruit for him, he didn't have a rider or anything demanding we have fruit at the ready, just expected us to know, was furious that more people didn't show up to fawn over him, was just generally furious. Instead of talking about his book during the lecture, he spent 20 minutes taking a steaming dump over the staff, venue, and audience. Ironic given the subject of his books. Edit. The only person we should talk more was J.A. Jance, who writes a handful of detective series and one inexplicable collection of poems. She loved doing events at our place and was there every 6 months to promote her newest book. She had a huge and devoted following, which baffled me because her events are insane. She once spent an entire hour singing for the audience. Not well. When we tried to tell her we were now closing, she sort of waved grandly to her adoring fans and said not until these people have heard me talk about my books, and then kept us open an additional hour while she mostly didn't talk about her book. She also always demanded we had copies of her poetry book on hand, despite the fact that no one wanted it and we could rarely even get copies from the publisher. Once we even wound up buying some from a discount bin at Costco just so we could technically have some on hand. Edit 2. It may have been a Walmart discount bin. It's been a minute. It's become public knowledge now, but Ellen DeGeneres. I met her, briefly, while working events at Universal Studios FL. Back in the mid 2000s she would on occasion film her talk show on location at Universal. My job would call for me to interact with Ellen and her crew for prepping and crowd control measures. There were 2 occasions that raised an eyebrow. First was behind set. The show was getting ready to start, and I went back to tell her crew that we were ready for her to make her way to the stage where her show was being recorded. When I walked back there I saw Ellen yelling at a crew member, inches from his face. She was belittling him and threatened to leave him in FL. Second occasion was brief but impactful. One of my co-workers was standing somewhat close to her, back to back with her. Ellen turned around, looked at her with a look of disbelief, and after a couple seconds said, "Aren't you just an invader of space?" She scoffed and walked away. We were both looking at each other thinking WTF is her problem. So for all those years I always thought of her as a funny, while all of America loved her. I was not surprised when all those stories of her being awful to work with came to light. I already had experienced it. Steve Harvey. For those who want to know, watch his interviews on Women and Atheists. He's cheated on his wives, physically abusive, acts like religion is the only thing that between him, and killing and raping people. Tim Allen lived near me for a while. Always a pompous ass. However, the gentleman who plays Gus Fring on Breaking Bad is a real good guy. Remembered my name and says hi to me when we run into each other at Whole Foods. He also tipped the cashier a WF $100 just because. Ed and Lorraine Warren. I'm not talking about taking advantage of people in vulnerable states and exploiting fear and trying to get famous by proving the paranormal, but Ed kept a young girl in their house. IRC they told neighbors she was a fallen woman they were helping out by giving her a job as a live-in maid or nanny. She wasn't. She was a child, and he was a predator, and Lorraine did nothing about it, and yes, they had a kid in the house. Really sickened me to find out, cause I like the Conjuring series as horror films and just enjoyed them for being kooky ghost hunters. Boy was I wrong. India Bollywood actor Salman Khan. DK head to almost all his fans. He ran a campaign called Being Human that was just presenting him as a good person who cares about poor and needy. Actually, it was just a publicity stunt for his few criminal cases like killing innocent people while drunk driving and killing endangered animals. His fans see him as a role model, but the campaign was just to get him a clean sheet from those criminal cases. After all the criminal charges were taken away from him, there is no being human is happening. Adding to that, he ruined a lot of upcoming actors, singers and other performers' professional life in Bollywood because he didn't like them, or according to him, they insulted him one and another way. His personal life is also shady. All of his girlfriends ended up relationship because of his personality, possessiveness and sadistic behavior. He is promoting nepotism in the film industry, and as I discussed before, he ruined a lot of people's lives. David Dobrik is probably one of the most tragic ones, not only cause he's a piece of shit, but because even if he was a great person, it's depressing that people even care about that content and actually watch that. Plus, indeed, he's a piece of shit abusive sociopath. Muhammad Ali. His unauthorized biography by Jonathan Ig is very eye-opening. Divorced his first wife because she wouldn't join the Nation of Islam, saying that she wouldn't do what she was supposed to do. She wore lipstick, she went into bars, she dressed in clothes that were revealing and didn't look right. During his second marriage he started an affair with a 16-year-old aged 32. He fathered a daughter with her. Divorced his second and third wife because of repeated infidelity. There were other allegations too. One claiming that he had started a sexual relationship with her when she was 12 and fathered her son. He also didn't like women boxing. Women are not made to be hit in the breast and face like that. Though later changed his mind after seeing his daughter fight. Joss Whedon. I idolized the guy for Buffy, Angel, Firefly, Cabin in the Woods, and so on. Then the shady stuff that went on behind the scenes came to light. Between the awful charisma Carpenter was treated before she was basically run off the show, and how they needed a rule on set that he wasn't allowed to be alone in a room with Michelle Trachtenberg, who was underage at the time. I lost pretty much all respect for him as a person. Oprah. She spent decades getting paid by every quack with a pseudoscientific health product to appear as guests on her show. It's no wonder her apprentices are a dubious psychiatrist and the quack-ass weirdo doctor who continued her business of using the trust of gullible Americans to sell snake oil. Mr. T is one huge twat wiffle. This happened in the 80s and Mr. T was everything at this time. My friend and I were downtown. We were 15, and it was our first trip downtown alone. Saw Mr. T and started toward him for an autograph. As we were walking, he parked his car in front of a bank and two little boys, about 7 years old, ran up to him, happy as hell. It was Mr. T. This bastard yelled, "Get the uck out my way you little mothruckers," and pushed the kid into his friend. I've hated that bastard ever since. If we had cells back then, a lot of stars would have been cancelled. People didn't got away with stuff because there was never any proof. Now there is. Steve Jobs. People worship him, and I understand why to some extent. He revolutionized technology, but he was very emotionally abusive to his daughter. She released a memoir IRC. Very disturbing stuff. Jackie Chan. I wouldn't say he's universally loved, but definitely way too popular in the West. It's pretty common knowledge here in Hong Kong. Abusive husband and father, effectively disowned an illegitimate daughter, lots of whoring and alcohol abuse, sold out Hong Kong during political unrest in favor of China, yet was banned from the Chinese Communist Party due to moral failings. Thank you.